I wasn't planning to make a video today about planting chestnut seeds in the late winter, but I realized there are a lot of notes and a lot of bits that I want to share with folks that I think could be useful if you're trying to get started with growing trees from seed. So I wanted to share, before I finish this last container of these, what I'm up to and some things that you may want to keep an eye out for if you're trying to grow trees from seed in a cold climate. For those of you that are regular viewers of this channel, this tub may seem familiar. I recently did a video talking about our root cellar and was showing that we're storing all sorts of tree seeds down there this fall or this winter, and I pointed out in particular this tub of chestnuts, which the seeds were beginning to sprout. For those of you that store tree seeds in a fridge, you may very well want to, at the end of this video, check all of your seeds. A lot of them may be starting to sprout. Once they do this, there's really no going back. They'll just continue to slowly grow, and every inch that these grow, they're more and more fragile. In fact, this would break off very easily at this point. So what I don't want to do is wait till April or May or June to try to plant these outdoors. Right now in our climate, Zone 5B, Central New York, the ground is frozen and there's still snow, so I have to handle these seeds in another way earlier on. In an ideal world and in the future, I think what I'll do is plant a number of these in our garlic patches, like I've talked about in other videos, in the fall with a deep mulch. That lets them be on their own timing. It's just challenging because then rodents may eat them. So I want to talk about how I'm handling this situation and just some food for thought how you may want to consider it too. I plan on making much more thorough videos going in depth with our air prune beds in the future. So keep an eye out for that video or subscribe if you haven't yet to see those. But for now, what I'll show are these prototypes that have been very promising of black locust boxes that are 1 foot by 2 foot. I make it very regular units so that they can be stackable. As you can see over here, 5 of them stacked up. These are going to go back down in our root cellar. I'll explain that in a moment. But if you're interested in these, stick around in the future. We'll talk about how these are all made. But basically there's a mesh on the bottom so that air can move freely underneath them, and these will ultimately be outside for the growing season. And I'll put a mesh on top that will protect them from rodents for now. And what I have been doing here is I'm filling these about halfway up with rotted wood chips and compost, which I talk about in greater detail in our hugelkultur nursery pot trick video, which I'll link to here. And then the rest of the way I'm mixing a mixture of soil from the chicken yard, more aged, fine compost, with a little bit of perlite and a little bit of aged sawdust. And that's going to be my potting mix. And what I'm doing here is very tedious, but these are such valuable beings. I would like each of these to become a tree. Is I'm making space for each one, and I'm planting them gently in the soil, and I'm going right down the line. Now you're going to say these are incredibly close, but if these are set out in full sun, watered thoroughly and protected in the summer, each tree may become 12, 18 inches, maybe even 2 feet tall, and they'll have a root-pruned bottom that will be very easy for transplanting. So these sorts of containers are quite nice. You can pot them up in a communal plastic pot, something like this. But I've learned over time this is really not a great solution. The roots will hit the bottom and start to spin. A lot of you may know this. And unless they hit air or they're in a really deep natural soil condition, the roots really suffer for being in a pot like this. So an air prune bed is the way to go if you're going to be potting them up early on. And the orientation that I'm going for, this is important, that taproot does not want to be pushed straight down in the soil. What it wants is basically to be laid on its side with the point of the root aiming out and down. Let me show again. Here's one where the taproot has come out and started to move along. the nut. And so what I'll do is lay this on the soil with that facing down. And I'm going to not worry about pushing these super deep. I can always get them to the depth I want by adding soil on top later on. This way I'm not going to injure them. If some of the nuts have no noticeable sprout happening or very minimal sprout, I'm going to set those aside. We can plant those later on in the season, hopefully outside in the soil. But those that are starting to really sprout, I really need to get them settled into soil. These will then get covered with a mesh, labeled, and we'll put them back in the root cellar so they can continue to develop their taproot in their actual growing position for the season. If you look over here, these are going to be moved down into the root cellar today. And what I've done is there's maybe 150 nuts in each of these, covered with soil, and then in this case I put perlite on top as an insulative and reflective cover. This could be sawdust. I just don't have much sawdust right now because it's all completely frozen. And then I've made a tag that's buried in here using my Listo Nursery pen that once it comes out, so I call this T-Berg Super because it's a super chestnut from Trumansburg, and C-nut for chestnut. And later on I can plant this out and set that stake in there. We'll provide other better coverage for this later on, but for now this is going to let us protect this from mice and voles, chipmunks and red squirrels. You'll notice I put some ground anchor pins in the corners to keep this from being easily pulled up. And so that's what we're working on right now, is handling the seeds in the root cellar that have woken up too early, getting them into these mobile air prune beds, and then settling them back into the root cellar. Words of encouragement for those of you starting trees from seed or just getting into this: check your seeds. Are they sprouting? And if so, come up with a game plan ASAP to get them actively moving. Thanks for watching.